Good evening, citizens. I'm Devoid. I'm joined today by my dad, Rev Atheist, and our friend Cyberpunk. This is Redacted, a live podcast where we talk about Star Citizen and its development.
And so today we're going to be talking a little bit less about the game, although we will be talking about the game. Um, Today we're going to be talking about running events, right? So it's no secret that Star Citizen doesn't have a huge amount of in-game content at the moment. That's
Correct?
improving with every patch, but one of the ways that players of Star Citizen get around that is by dealing with events. There's lots of great events. Uh, Daymar Rally being probably one of the biggest, most well known. And we're
Yep.
going to talk about how you can run events and be successful at that. Cyberpunk with the Rec Raiders is with us. He's run plenty of great events. As a matter of fact, we've learned quite a bit from him. Welcome to the show, Cyberpunk.
Hi guys, thanks a lot for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course, man. Thanks for being here. I'm glad that you could change your Friday plans to work with us. So I appreciate that very much.
Yeah, no, it's like I said, it's an honor to be a part of it all. I'm happy to do it. I think it's a really great thing that you guys are doing here. But I'm sure we'll touch on that later.
Well, thanks. Thank you.
Yeah.
Um,
Cool.
so I thought that I might start just by kind of giving a little bit of history. There's a very specific reason why I wanted Cyberpunk to talk with us today. And that reason is the Pyro Freelancer Corps, our organization. We started just over 3 years now. December of 2020 was our like anniversary, right? Like when we started. So April that following year, 2021, was our very first event ever, and we called it the Daymar Games. And we have it every year. We're going to have it again this year, but it ended up being way bigger than we anticipated. We had this big, huge prize pool that was sponsored by a guy, and we ended up with I think like 36 contestants, which was wild because we were a small group of like 3 or 4 dudes,
Brand spanking
barely
new.
knew the game. Yeah,
Yep. And
brand spanking new.
it was like a $30 million pot or 30 million AUEC pot. It was pretty big for us. We were like,
Yeah,
whoa.
yeah. A controller. We did have it last year, but attendance was super, super low because I did a shit job at advertising. So I'll do better this year.
I do
Um,
just want to say on that note that I was a part of both of those, and from a player perspective, it was fantastic both times.
well, thank you for that. Thank you for
I
that.
accidentally killed one of my own, but such is war.
That,
Yeah, it happens,
ac-
man.
Not accidentally, huh? Okay.
But being our first event, it was rocky because anybody who has played Star Citizen more than casually knows that sometimes it can take hours just to get the ball rolling on simple things. And trying to get an event going with 36 contestants, tens of millions of credits and prizes, trying to get everybody coordinated and moving efficiently, it took a lot longer for us to get going than I had hoped. There was a lot of confusion, and we did pretty good for our first time in being green. But Cyberpunk specifically, after the event came and he helped us and said, "Hey, man, I've got some feedback if you're open to it," which we were, and that kind of hit off our relationship. And so he kind of helped us to pave the road to host some really fantastic events together. The most recent being the Jet Puffed Racers, but he also hosts like Murder Carrick every Halloween. We've hosted the Daymar Games every year since, um, and Rock and Roll as well. Just before Jet Puffed Racers, every year we do these events. So I wanted to talk to Cyberpunk. Do you have like a 10 Commandments maybe for putting an event together?
Uh,
This
well,
is
you
this
know,
is
it's
what we
funny.
call on the spot. Is what we call this.
Yeah, yeah. I was going to say it's funny you mentioned that, Dev, because knowing that I would be on and this would be what we would be talking about today, I put some thought to trying to reduce down to some distinct core principles that I think everyone who's trying to run a group event should focus on. And I'll preface that with a caveat that success in this of an event can be somewhat of an objective term, or it can at least have multiple meanings or implications. But the three things I think that are most important are respect for time, mutual respect for time among people. The second thing is culture of the participants, if not simply the hosts, because obviously you can't always control your guests. I mean, I should say the culture of the host is the most important, because you have to be able to accommodate all kinds of guests. And so the third thing is, help me out, Rev. What was it? We were just talking about it. I had it. It was so good. Um,
It was good, and I was trying to make it keep it fresh, so I wasn't paying attention. I don't recall.
oh, it's okay. I might have to come back to it for a second. It was mutual respect for time,
Yeah,
culture,
yeah.
and um. Oh, I perhaps I'm not remembering what term I reduced it to, but it's the reward. And
Mm.
this is where the caveat about measuring success comes from. And so the payoff of an event is people having a good time. It's not necessarily you win a 30 million prize pool. Like, sure, the bragging rights, the ability for that, like you can go buy any ship with AUEC you want. Like, that's awesome, especially for someone who maybe doesn't already have everything after being a backer for so long. So
Was it
like without
camaraderie?
diminishing, I don't think so, but
Yeah, all right.
but that's very much on the right theme, though. You're on the right track.
Yeah.
But the distinction I'm trying to make is that, you know, obviously you can't diminish the material rewards that you should have, the incentive for people to say like, well, I'd rather do this event than just do ERTs all night long. So like you have to have that. But I think as an org trying to do this repeatedly, the most important thing you can do is make sure that people have fun and make happy memories that they're proud of. Make it something that they're, proud to have been a part of, so that when you do it again, they're eager to participate. Oh, it was promotion. That's what it was, Rev. It was promotion. It
Okay.
was mutual respect for time, culture, and promotion, or preparation, not promotion. Preparation, which includes promotion. Excuse me. It's Friday, so I'm already a little lit. Excuse me, but
That's okay,
that's my
man.
that's my natural headspace. So I tried to be as authentic as possible.
I
Cyberpunk is
appreciate
a
that.
lot less sober than the person who plays it. But nevertheless, yes, that was it. Preparation. Can't believe that didn't come to. But yes, so pursuant to that, I kind of got ahead of myself and started talking about the value that you get away from, a good event. But it's preparation, which includes promotion. And um, when it comes to events, like you actually just mentioned with your Daymar games, it was a very good structurally event. Everybody who played knew it and was eager to do it, but it's just like there wasn't enough lead time, or
Yep.
I can't remember exactly what the issue was, but it's like you said, something about the promotion was less than optimal, and so it was sadly a little bit less of a turnout.
Yeah.
Um,
I was going through some personal stuff. I had just gotten my own business rolling, working from home, and I lost track of time. But yeah, promotion is a huge thing. It's a huge deal because you can have the coolest event in the world, but if nobody knows about it and you're not hyping it up, it doesn't fucking
right,
matter, right?
right.
Oh, I have this cool event, but nobody's here. So
Yeah. But just to elaborate on the other, just to return to your question of what are the Ten Commandments, just to kind of go through what those specifically mean. Um, a mutual respect for time is something is every you can't make someone be respectful, so you have to make sure that you invite people who are going to be cooperative. So assuming that you have a cooperative player environment, everyone needs to, if you put out ahead of time, hey, we're playing in the Daymar games, so that means everyone should set their respawn to PO, have sets of gear there ready so that you can put them on the ship that's going to take you there to respawn. And so that can be a little tedious, but writing up a little document with some bolding and some underlining and just putting that in a special channel for the event, all these little things just make it that they lower the activation energy for someone to actually engage with the rules and the preparation. And
Right.
so,
So that reminds me, some of the things that I've picked up here, specifically on that idea of setting the expectations of the participants, right? That idea of you
right,
need to be at such and such location, you need to have your spawn set, to this location, and but then that second piece of we're kicking off at X time, and then you kick off at X time, and you don't sit
right,
around
I agree
waiting
with
for
that
the three
completely.
people out of the 20 that haven't shown up yet or that are having trouble. It's like, sorry, man, we said this is the time. Out of respect of all these other people who are here, we're kicking off now. So
I
so
agree with exactly what you're
there's
saying.
two sides there.
You're talking about mutual respect for time, and you brought up the fact of culture, right? Well, as an organizational leader, such as yourself, myself, and Rev, right? If we do exactly that, we say, hey, we have party formation, we're meeting in menus at X, we are launching at X15, we are taking off from this station at X30, right? And you stick to those, then sure, they're in the beginning, there's bound to be people who get left behind, and maybe they're a little bit sour about it.
Yeah,
But
and that's
after
not
you
to say
do that,
that's not to say there's no wiggle room. 5 minutes, maybe.
right,
Sure.
right. And that's not to, there might be people who are sour about it, right? But after you do that 3, 4, 5 times, right, then people come to realize like, hey, we're leaving at X time. Maybe I should be prepared and I won't miss the bus next time, right?
I hate to
Maybe
suck us. Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say to your point. I hate to suck us down a rabbit hole, but that's a very important philosophical distinction. I think that org runners who want to be successful need to understand, and that is that you need to reward compliance and engagement, and not cater to people who don't make the effort to meet you halfway. And like
Right.
that's exactly right.
for every one person that feels sour, if there are 5 people that feel valued, that's an absolute win.
I agree completely.
Yep.
Yeah. So
Absolutely.
please, back to what you were saying.
Yeah, I mean that was pretty much it. I'm just saying, after 3 or 4 times of you sticking to your guns, then your community is going to realize that these are the times they either need to be there or be square, right? And they will learn like, hey, these are the guidelines that are set out. I can be there or not, and they're either going to stick around and enjoy these events as you present them, or they're not. And in the end, if people don't stick around, like that's okay too, right? The people who naturally stick around, who naturally engage, those are the people that you want. You don't want to just recruit Joe Blow off the street and work so hard to keep him in if it's not a natural fit. And if you kind of breed this community of punctuality and people are coming and playing, everybody benefits from it. And the people who naturally stick around are going to just better your community.
Yeah.
Right.
I,
And
I
go
honestly
ahead,
think
Rev.
that I honestly think that that's even going to be a draw for those people that aren't as punctual, because they're going to see that kind of consistency, that kind of engagement, that kind of, like, they, even if they're not punctual, they know what to expect. And there's a lot of value in that, even for somebody who has difficulty keeping to the schedule that you set. I think they'll see that, and they'll respect it, and it can still be a draw even for those kind of people.
Well, and that's actually a beautiful segue into the next pillar, which is culture, and that's exactly it. You want to do something that obviously, and it's not like it's easy to do. That's why it's kind of an art form and such a like a sandboxy game where you can do anything and nothing matters. Like I quoted that famous whose line is it anyway, where the rules are made up and the money isn't real or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but anyway, it's so important to make it something that people feel proud to have participated in, and whether that takes the shape of they got the headshot that saved the runner, or whether they healed the driver, or they flipped the car in time. Like, I'm sure all of us who have participated, let alone run in events, we don't really remember exactly how much the prize money was for second or third place or first place, but we do remember that time that like we almost blew up, or we saw someone else blow up right beside us as we were going 80 miles an hour through the
Yeah.
dark.
Or the
you know
time that you fucking bombed Drago planning from 10 kilometers away at Mock Jesus.
Yeah, dude. Like, people underestimate the sheer destructive power of a gray cat buggy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Dolomite, baby.
Yeah, that's all fantastic points. Um
Uh,
I'm going to bring
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, but yeah, the even though that the memories you make are great and stuff, that's kind of a different thing. But it's the having the culture of like, we're gonna have a good time, we're gonna give it our all and be glad to do it, and like that. It's a difficult thing to inspire, but it's I should say it's not something you inspire, it's something you cultivate. So please go ahead.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I was just going to kind of lead off and start talking about some more boots on the ground objective things that organization leaders or event organizers could do just to kind of help streamline the process of things. Um, at the end of the day, right, as an event organizer, the goal for you is to provide an event where your players can log in and start doing the event.
Right.
Obviously, you mentioned there's a mutual respect for time, right? So there is some responsibility on those players to put in a little bit of effort in order to increase the overall fun for everybody. But at the end of the day, as an organizer, it's your responsibility to make sure that you do what you can so your event goes off without a hitch, right? Um, so just a couple of points that I have found to be super helpful when building an event is one, to have a clearly defined objective. I've had a whole bunch of people approach me and say, "Hey, I'd really like to run an event." And I'm like, "Great. Can you tell me what your event is?" And they're like, "Well, it's sort of like this with a little bit of this." And I'm thinking maybe we can do something like this. And it's just kind of vague and unclear. They don't know where they want to have it. They don't know what wants to be included or unincluded. They have this idea in their mind when they can't articulate, right? And I certainly understand that sometimes it can be hard, but having that clearly articulated event design is important so that people can look at this sheet that you have that outlines the event. They could say, "Oh, it's this day at this place. I need to have this prepared." Is this going to be a PvP event? Is this going to be a race? Do I need to obtain a vehicle? Do I need to have it claimed and ready to go? Do I need to have, med supplies or a tractor beam or whatever, right?
And if I could, I think that understanding and writing down those logistical things, like simply deciding on those locations, like obviously that other things that are further ahead, like what are the game rules, like those can precede this a little bit, in terms of inspiring what you want to do. But like it's most important for you to understand, well, what would I really need to do this, and then make your decisions about your game rules based on what you can feasibly field in a reasonable time with the people you have.
Right.
I
Exactly.
think that is to say, like, you should, if you're going to do an event, you should think about what are my logistical capabilities and what can I do with that, and not pie in the sky. I want to have a cool rooftop battle in Area 18, and then realize you don't have the means to do that.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
So to elaborate more on that, that goes insofar as when you're planning your event, right, and you're making decisions about where it's going to be and what resources you need. It's important to do the dry run, right? Can I
Oh
even
my
get
god,
my vehicles in the place where I want this race to go?
absolutely.
Right? Can I provide a box with the materials in the location where I want the materials to be? Right? Is it possible to actually put these things in place ahead of time? And then do I have the ability to do that? Um, Super important, because
Yeah.
if you
Yeah.
say, hey, I've got this event, and you say it's going to be in this place, and then all of a sudden the time comes, you're like, oh, you're scrambling to get everything in place, and then discovering that you have real problems with actually accomplishing the thing you said was going to be done. That is not gonna instill confidence in any future
And it's
events
not
for
going to be
certain.
fun. It's not going
No.
to be
Right.
fun. Um, and that kind of segues me into three sub points from this one point, right? Um, in my mad dash to get home from work and get ready, I actually started writing out my plot points. I was like, I meant to have these done earlier this morning. But we talked about clearly defined objective. Well, below that, right? We talked a little bit about early prep. What does that include? Sometimes it's as simple as making sure you log out at the right station. It's amazing how many people don't do that, right? They
Right.
say, "Oh, I'm in Hurston today. I log out at Everest Harbor," or they just Alt F4 or whatever. But hey, the event tomorrow at 9 a.m. is at Bygenie Point. Uh-oh, problem. And then that goes back to the stick to your timelines. If you miss the bus, you miss the bus. Sucks to suck. So
Yeah.
early prep work, making sure you are where you need to be. Ideally, the players would have the gear that they need to have, but it's not always going to happen. So that takes me to point number two: is it's a good idea for event organizers to plan on people not being prepared. So just like Rev kind of mentioned, have a big ass box in your ship, right? Or easily accessible that is preloaded with any required gear, right? If it's a PvP event that you're doing, have it preloaded with some basic gear sets, guns, ammo, med guns, whatever, right? Just have it ready to go. That way you don't get in when and 5 people are like, "Oh, I got to run to the store really quick and gear up." Say, "No, no, no. Get to the ship.
I got
I
what you
got you."
need. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and just as an easy example, when we did rock and roll, we have a respawn ship there in case people die. And even though it wasn't like the highest quality thing, I just bought like 12 sets of the Novikov suit and helmet with
Yeah,
med
it was
beds,
enough.
and
It
it's
was
just like
enough.
it's enough for someone to get back in the game and to spawn a
Mm-hmm.
vehicle.
That's
Yep.
right.
Which was the core point of that. It was
Yeah,
weather protection, so you could get in and you could do the event still. You had everything you
right.
needed to do the event, and that was a huge plus, right? My inventory bugged out, so I was stuck sitting on the Carrack for the last 20 minutes of that. But I saw people coming out of the med bay, looting the box and going, and come out, loot the
Yeah,
box and
and
go. So
thanks.
it's
Shout out to Phaedron for providing that cargo box. It was essential.
yeah, that was awesome. So redundantly have spares for whatever required materials you may need. If it's like a race or something, it's a good idea to maybe go and buy 1 or 2 extra vehicles. Harder to do, obviously, if it's like an actual ship as opposed to like a hover bike or like an Ursa or something. But
Yeah,
having a couple spare vehicles might be good.
there are some ways to deal with the vehicles, though, right? So if you have a couple of extra bodies in the coordinator realm, if they've got 1 or 2 vehicles that they can spawn and let people take, right, then that increases
Yeah,
that pool of
yeah,
available
definitely.
vehicles. So I'm just saying there are ways even around that.
Yeah, harder, not impossible, but a little harder on the bigger vehicles.
A little harder.
But
Yeah.
the third kind of sub point that I have to that clearly defined objective, another thing that I see all the time is people come up with these books with events that talk about these are the objectives, these are my rules. No X, no X. You can only use X. You have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this, right? And it's like a pamphlet, and you got to go through, and it's like, holy shit, this is a lot. Super annoying to read through. You're just dreading doing the event. No overbearing rules. The less rules you can have in an event, the better. For 2 reasons. Okay. The first big reason is that there's no way to police it. So what good is it going to do anyway? You're going to say, "Oh, you used a railgun when I said no railguns. You're kicked out." Like that's no fun.
Yeah,
That's
well,
just going to make people mad,
you're just gonna breed a griefer there.
Yeah,
It's like,
exactly.
oh,
right?
I'm out and I can't be here. Ha ha ha! I got more rail guns, buddy.
Yeah, exactly,
Shit.
right? So it's you can't really police it, right? Then all of your participants have to keep all of these rules in mind as they're participating, which can be a hassle because when you're in the moment, when you're playing, the last thing you're thinking about is what are the rules? What are the rules? Not thinking about that.
Yeah, I definitely shoot and think about rules later.
Exactly, right? And that's kind of
Right.
our mantra when we're doing like PvP, like, hey, shoot first. We can always revive you if it's a problem. It's the same thing when you're in an event, right? You fucking shoot first, you think later. That's kind of how it goes. It's up to the leaders to think first and shoot later. That's how it works. But the second big reason that I think having less rules is typically better is because it opens up freedom for your participants, excuse me, to think about how they want to approach a situation. And some of the most fun that you can have an event is having flexible ways to accomplish your goal and creating that super creative path to victory, right? So if you're not limiting by all these factors, they can say, "Oh, well, I can do this and I can do this," and they come up with some crazy ass shit, and whoa, it worked this time. How cool is that? You're talking about breeding
Right.
that culture and having those cool stories to share with your friends. Having the access to creative paths to that victory is a great way to breed that.
Yeah. So to
Um,
to elaborate a little bit on that first point about the rules, another reason to keep the rules low, like short, is so that you can remember them. Right. If you've got like 10 pages of rules, I'm not remembering that in the heat of the moment. And even if I want to obey all of the rules and do my very best to make sure that I'm following what was put out, I'm probably not going to remember them all. And
Yeah, and if
a
somebody
good chance
slips
of me
up,
breaking
right?
something, breaking a rule and
Yeah,
not even realizing
exactly.
it.
Can I give an example for something really quick?
Please do.
I don't want to call out. I'm not going to call out any names or something, but the
Go ahead.
PFC engaged in a multi-org, multi-day event. Right. The idea was like it was like once a month for 4 months. It was kind of weird how they structured it, but we went with it. We wanted to give it a shot, and the idea was that it was a PvP event, and every month was a different objective. And when they approached us, it was it was very much like I said, it was a booklet, right? And they had laid out these point systems where each team would start with a certain amount of points that they can then spend, and different ships had different point values. You would have to spend those points to pull out specific ships or use specific weapons. And then at the end of the event, you could return those ships in exchange for points, and the more ships you shot down was extra points. And it was and like being like first, second, or third place awarded a different tier of points. And then there was restrictions on guns you could use, and restrictions on not ships but loadouts you could use. Like you could use like an Inferno, but you couldn't use size 5 missiles. Um or you couldn't use torpedoes, right? And I'm going to use that example in just a minute. But it was just super convoluted on the rules. And then afterward, it was a situation where multiple orgs would partner up. So it was like a 2 org versus 2 org situation here.
Devoid, can I ask you something?
Of course.
When you did those events, did someone go verify those things? Like compliance for that? Like did they check
Um,
your Inferno theoretically?
I will get there.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Nice.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
Dying to know. Edge
It's
of my
okay.
seat.
So then, after having this booklet of rules and points systems that we were required to follow. Oh yeah, Drago says it was specifically you couldn't use torpedoes or EM missiles. It was super silly. Then after they presented their booklet of rules and shit, they gave me another booklet and said, "Hey, this is the tactic that we want to use for this event." And it was also incredibly convoluted, and it relied on everything going perfectly. And if it didn't go perfectly, everything fell apart. And we could see that just when we were reading that. And I was looking at Barracuda, who's the guy who typically runs like our FPS stuff. And he was like, "What the fuck am I looking at?" I was like, "Dude, I don't know. But this is their circus. Do what you can to let it fall apart, and then maybe we'll come in after and try and help them see what they did wrong," right? Because they invited us to this event after we stomped their teeth in another PvP event. So, we kind of know what we're doing.
I like how you phrased that delicately.
But anyway, the event gets going, and it was almost exactly how Barracuda had predicted it. Everything fell apart in the air because it didn't go exactly according to plan. And according to their book of tactics, the ground crew was to stay put until we had air superiority. So our guys on the ground were sitting there for like 45 minutes, right? And it was boring, super boring. Well, towards the end, when there was no clear hope that anything was going to happen in the air, Big Rex said, "Fuck this," and took all of the ground guys and led a last ditch charge, right? And although the leadership of the org we were partnered with got really upset at that, everybody on the ground, including their org's participants, said it was some of the most fun they'd ever had. The victory.
EOD is here saying that event with the other org not so long ago where they told us just don't shoot us was also fire.
Yeah, that's another example that I'm not going to get into because I think this example covers the broad range of what I'm trying to say. But obviously we lost that round, but Big Rec did what he could to make sure everybody had fun. And then come the points tally, and this was a dumpster fire too. During the event, everybody was required, not just team leaders, but everybody was required to document the ships that they pulled out and their points totals to do a tally at the end. So if you're in the middle of your game, you pull out an arrow, you then had to like alt tab into a Discord page on a specific channel, tally in your fucking arrow's worth 10 points, put it in. And then at the end of the event, everybody who returned their ships and restored them had to go in and make their corrections, right? And more nuance, somebody had ended up using like some size 5 missiles or some shit, right? I don't know what size it is, but there's a size where it goes from missile to torpedo, right? And I believe it's size 5. So there are
I
some
believe that's
size
correct.
5s that are labeled as missiles, some size 5s that are labeled as torpedoes. That's just how it goes. I believe like the Warlock or something has size 5 missiles, where I think maybe it's size 7. I don't know. But it's a big ass missile, right? And some of them are missiles, some of them are torpedoes. Well, the rules said no torpedoes and no EM missiles. So the team that ultimately won had found that this big ass missile was labeled as a missile and used it. And so then there was an argument. Did they break the rules by using this big ass missile? Well, it's called a missile, not a torpedo, yada yada. And in the end, they ended up just letting them count it as fine. But the takeaway here is that all of these nuances and all of these rules ultimately degraded everybody's enjoyment. And in the end, I don't even know if they finished doing all 4 months because we quit after month 2 because people would not listen to our suggestions about, hey, this is too complicated. Let's simplify it. Let's, try a couple of things. And said, no, this is going to work this time. We said, no, it's not. And they actually got mad at us and blamed us for their loss because we didn't follow direction. So I said, fuck this. I'm pulling my guys out. I'm not subjecting them to this. And we left. Right. So
Well, I think
anyway,
that that's a great story to bring up because it's an example of how you need to that's an imbalance of too much preparation and too much um, intricacy and not enough just reward and fun for the players.
yeah,
Um,
it was bad. It
yeah.
was
And
bad.
so that's something that, you can with good intentions and a lot of passion and effort, you can still do a really bad job, you know?
Yeah.
And something I noted earlier that I just wanted to bring up is you mentioned how having freedom for the players in events is an important thing for many reasons, but that just dovetails so nicely into the culture of preparing. Because if you say to someone, hey, you can only wear an undersuit and an arc light to this event, they're going to show up 2 seconds before because they can just pull one out of their local inventory and walk on the ship. But if you
Yep.
tell them, hey, anything goes, dude, they're going to be like, holy crap, boys, we need to get a ship to Grimhex yesterday so that we can get the gear and then get it by Genie so that we can be ready to go. And then, and they'll be
Yeah,
slapping
they're
the
gonna
people
reach
who
out to the requisitions officers and be like, "Hey, I need a couple of these. What can you do for me?"
they'd be like, yeah, I know the price just tripled. Uh, but anyway, that's I think that's one of those things where it's important. Is a well-known concept when you make a rule or a law, the effect it has, like the solution that it's trying to provide to a problem, ultimately just kind of causes a different problem, you
Yeah,
know.
absolutely.
And so that's why another reason why less rules, more flexibility is important because you can't fight that. Um, and something that one of the major forces behind the successes of our previous events, one of our patch members, Kensley, and his lovely wife, Valerie Rose. I believe she's in the audience. Hey, Val! Yay! Um, anyway, one of the things that he always stressed is that giving the players giving the players freedom to make their own decisions is not only more interesting, and yes, it involves the meta, just as like like rabbit hole disclaimer. Yes, certain ships are broken. Are we going to tell people they can't use them? Probably not, because you just got to deal with that. Like if you're going to use, like EMP weapons exist, so you need to plan around that. And that means that, like, if for example we're doing a ground event and we have the cyclone that can do EMP, rare but they exist. The like, you need to have a guy on the ground with a railgun ready to smoke that mug. Like
Yeah,
like that's that you have to think of a counter.
I
And
agree
so
completely.
if you rigidly structure the event like, hey guys, here's the tactics we have to do, like, they're not even thinking about what the enemy's doing. They're not even engaging with what they could do or what they
Yeah,
want to do or what would be fun or what they're drawn to. They're just following directions. And
exactly.
so,
Yep.
like, that's the death of that's the mind killer right there.
So
I agree.
I want to bring something up because I think it's important, and we haven't really talked about it, but we have talked about the need for promotion, right? Which is super important. So that's going on the Facebook groups. That's going on uh, the Reddits, the
Like
locations
Reddit and shit.
wherever it is that Star Citizen folks are that you want to attract. Going there and making sure to tell them about your event multiple times. But the flip side of that is that means a lot of people theoretically are going to know about your event. So security can be very important, especially if it turns out to be a popular event. So
Absolutely.
you have to have some plan for protecting the event from those who would cause havoc on your event. Because there's a pretty
I
good
agree.
chance that you're going to find somebody who's just going to go, haha, I'm going to just go drop an A2 bomb, like right smack dab in the middle of that sumbitch. That'll be fun.
Having done that to an organization, I agree with you.
So,
Yeah.
gotta
Yeah,
have a
having
plan.
done that, I agree. Security is important, and there's two ways you can do it, right? And I feel like they're pretty obvious. One, you can hope that you have enough guys in your own group to field some fighters, right? To make sure the comm rate stays down. You got protection from the air, whatever you're doing, right? Or two, there are so many organizations that exist to do things like mercenary work and to run security. And sometimes the interaction between you and that other org in just getting that security set up is so much fun by itself.
Yeah. On that note, just this is a not necessarily related, but just fundamental thing of why I like Star Citizen so much is that not only that, but even this podcast right now, Star Citizen is such an intricate game and it's set in such a world that by the virtue of playing it, you're kind of role playing it. And so, like, when you reach out to that mercenary org, even though it's just a Discord chat or maybe, with Gilded or whatever they use, or maybe you actually meet in the game, like, philosophically, it's like the same thing as going to meet them at the Wayfarer's Rest in Silver Moon City, and like my character leans against the wall and says, "Hey, have you got what I asked for?" Like
It
it
really
doesn't
is.
doesn't look like that, but
Jiggles
it
money
is the
bag.
same thing, and
It
so
is.
like if you think about it in Star Citizen, like if you just imagine that Discord is an extension of Moby-Glass, it's like, damn, like we're playing Star Citizen 24/7, like maybe in 10 years time Spectrum will be as big as Discord, and like we won't even need another third platform,
Yeah,
you
there'll
know.
just be a Spectrum app like in Discord, and we'll just live in there, right?
Right.
There is one more thing that I wanted to say, and it kind of tangents off of your tangent from my discussion, where we were talking about freedom of choice. In you present your players with an objective and allow them to suss out how they're going to tackle it. This has more implications for the future as well, because we're in a place in Star Citizen right now where things are relatively mild, right? I mean, we don't have a ton of gameplay loops. We've only got the one system,
Maybe Dev's
right?
having some audio trouble or some input trouble.
No?
No.
It might just be Discord, Cyber. I have Discord issues, but Rev's not hearing me through Discord, and the
Oh,
stream's
okay.
not
He's
hearing
going in
me
and
through
out for me.
Discord.
It's all right.
Yeah,
Show
it's a
must go on.
Discord thing. It's a Discord thing, but we can handle it later. Stream's hearing me fine. Rev's hearing me fine. Um, what I was saying though is it's got some implications for the future. Star Citizen is in a pretty mild place. We've only got one system. Gameplay loops aren't super extensive. You've got mining, salvage, cargo running, and combat pretty much. There might be some other more niche things, but that's pretty much it, right? And existing in the Star Citizen universe is going to require a certain level of logistical capabilities, right? A certain level of preparation, a certain level of teamwork. It's not, if, depending on what you choose to do, the bulk of Star Citizen is not going to be something where you could just, as a casual solo player, hop on for 20 minutes and get anything meaningful done. You know, Star Marine, Arena Commander, those game modes exist for that type of player, but the persistent universe is definitely going to be much more involved. And when you run events like these and you allow this structured group of players that you've brought together in community to have the decisive freedom to view a situation and make decisions on how to handle it, then that opens the door for future situations where maybe you're not even doing an event, right? Maybe you're just it's a Sunday afternoon and you and 5 dudes are maintaining your base on some abstract planet somewhere, Pyro 3, and you guys get, "Oh, there's a fucking air raid coming in." Well, suddenly, now that we've done 10,000 events together, these guys can spring right into action. They can take in what's happening. "Oh, hey, you remember our event last year where we reenacted this? I know what the fuck to do." Right? And then they can react to the situation, and they know how to use that creative freedom to come up with a solution that maybe the person attacking you didn't see, right? And this is true for not just that situation, but if you're like taking down comma rays and you get run up on by somebody trying to stop you, right? If you are doing an event and you couldn't get security and somebody comes to try to fuck you up, right? Maybe you can respond to that better. It has implications for a wide array of Star Citizen gameplay that's outside of events. That's another reason why I really believe in creative freedom and decision making when it comes to events. Just because it helps in every aspect.
100%.
And it ties in to the underlying concept that I brought up earlier about about what is the success of an event. You know, like the success of an event obviously has the material aspects to it, but the more significant, in my opinion, um, meter that you should measure your event against is how is it remembered, and what do people take away from it? How do they how does it change or affect, like you were saying, with preparing them for the future? You know, like I'm it might take me a minute to think of some names or some more specific examples, but I mean, Tonk of War, I remember, was one where even though it's a different story to talk about how that ended, but like in the preparation for Tonk of War and for the actual early hours of it, like it was such a great moment for the Rec Raiders to shine as a team, because like we even helped another team out of a ditch, I remember, and it was
Mhm.
because we had done all these events together and we had been through a million glitches, together, and we were patient and understanding as to like, okay, well, don't push it, like back off.
Yeah, I remember that.
You,
I flew air patrol for that one.
yeah, yeah, and so we actually like that was the payoff in terms of like the success of previous events, and that one too, is that like we were competent and we made a difference and people remembered us. And like I even went to CitizenCon this last year and got to meet some people from Atmo in person, and like they remembered me from the game, just like I know them, and
Oh
I'm just,
yeah.
compared to them, I'm just some nobody who participated. Um but no, like it's like Sandy Gardner said at like the second CitizenCon, it's just like anybody in this room raise your hand, and if you've had your life affected or made a friend, from playing Star Citizen, and
Yeah.
it's just like everybody raises their hand, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So the guys in chat, I'm just going to acknowledge this real quick. They're talking about having some specific, you know, they're talking about like having commands to like clear comms and stuff, and that sort of discipline. And I mean that's all like important in an event, right? In its own right. But that's not really what we're talking about right now. That's some more specific
Yeah. That's like some,
organization to organization
yeah,
thing and how
that's
they want to
some,
handle their discipline.
that's some in the moment dealing with the event, which is important. But yeah, no, this really is a talk more about planning and more general putting on the event, and just having a successful one. Which brings me to the one thing I wanted to say, which is kind of defining what exactly does success mean for your event.
Yeah.
Now, as a coordinator of the event, to me, if you're defining the success of your event as anything other than the players of my event generally did what was supposed to happen and everyone had fun, then I mean that's fine, but you might be
Also, what's the
missing
point?
you might be missing the mark, right?
Yeah.
Um, I don't know.
I
Just
can I no, I can sort of piggyback off of that. And this isn't necessarily related to an event per se. But I will say that what we're talking about isn't going to be applicable to every org. This is more of a general, for the semi-casual to semi-hardcore players trying to put on events. This is might be what you be looking at, right? We were approached recently by another group, guys who we've played with before. They're honestly really good guys. Have absolutely no problems, no beef with them at all. But they were saying like, "Hey, we've got a group, and we might want to bring them over to the Pyro Freelancer Corps. We think you guys are a great fit for our guys." And they came to us because they just didn't have um, the energy really to put in the work of a community leader and continue to build out their group in a way that was beneficial for everybody, right? And so they said, hey, we like what you guys have going on. We think that you'd be a good fit. Clearly you know how to run a community, and I think we could be a good fit. And the more we got to talking, right, um it turns out they ended up being a more hardcore org. And they said, look, success to us, and there's nothing wrong with this, they said success to us is becoming the best, right? They wanted
Domination.
to yeah, they wanted to be the best. They wanted to put in the reps and become the best players in the game. And ambitious as that is, and there's nothing wrong with that. If you want to have that sort of hard discipline and you want to play the game on that level, that's fine. But we ended up rejecting their offer because exactly like you said, that's all fine and well. And being good at the game and being able to have that success in the face of adversity is going to create memorable situations for your players. So, there's a beneficial aspect to that.
Yeah, and that
But at
may
the
be
end of the
what's
day, if you're
fun
not
for your players, which is the thing.
yeah,
Right.
and
Yeah.
it may be,
Yeah.
right? It may be.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, if you're not prioritizing the fun over the victory, then I feel personally like you're doing something wrong. If you're sitting there screaming at your players because they're not following directions to a T, or maybe they are, but they're still losing, and you're saying, "Oh, you're not doing good enough," or blah blah blah, right? You're losing touch with the
Yep.
point.
Yep. You haven't done
Right.
the 10 steps necessary to be certified to do the one thing that you want to do in our org. Like,
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
if I might,
you might.
I thank you. I have been in the position of leadership in the Rec Raiders since I think 2016. Yeah, I think it was 2016, maybe 2017. It's been a long time. But the
It's been
org,
84
I've
years.
right, yeah, exactly. It's been 84 years. But I've seen the org. Let me clarify. I see myself more as a curator, and I'm not trying to diminish anything, but like the Rec Raiders has its merits have always been that it's authentic and organic, and
Yeah.
and I think that that's a thing that many orgs can relate to. That's the only reason I mention it. Not trying to rep us, but
No, you're welcome
I
to, man.
I have never tried to push the org in a direction that it didn't want to go. And sometimes that's kind of come into conflict with our earliest precepts. Like I was saying earlier, us being on this podcast is like we're kind of playing Star Citizen right now in a sense because we're, people who are experienced in the world and we're talking about things, conveying it to other people. This, may as well be on screens in Grimhex. Maybe someday we can but like
Oh, I hope so.
back in 2015, we were with the best of intentions and the most hope in our hearts you can imagine, or further fervor in our hearts. We were drafting 50-page documents about how our org would work as a salvage org and what are the different things that you need to do for different operations. And I am, little known fact, I'm actually a certified scuba diver. Haven't done it in years. Like maybe I need to be recertified, but I have been a certified, PADI scuba diver in my life. And so I was applying that knowledge to the concept of how we conduct EVA, search and rescue, and salvage and recovery missions. And so like you have a buddy and you know always communicate with your not only your light, like the person in the back is always watching the front, blah blah blah. We were drafting procedures, and there, as the game existed at that point, most of that was just like fan service, or not a fan service, fan fiction. Like we were just like thinking of like the space sim that might be someday where this would be relevant.
Mhm.
And we even had things about like how we would fly, and it was all based on like one of our earliest and dearest members was Bishop, and he was actually a special operator for the Air Force, and so he knew about like ground tactics and logistical tactics and convoy stuff. And so like it was like the original Rec Raiders procedural handbook is actually really cool to read. But the thing is that when it comes to actually playing the video game, sorry everybody, it's still a video game, that is Star Citizen, is that 95% of it's not fucking relevant. Some of the concepts are like good to know and keep in mind, but ultimately the biggest difficulties aren't like, are we sweeping this room properly? It's, did people show up on time? Do we have the stuff right?
Honestly,
Do people understand the rules? Are we here and ready to go? Like, is the
Yeah.
yeah,
ship within
Uh-huh.
respawn range? Like, so
yep,
all these things that, like, the actual truly, like, hey, here's how you make successful events work, doesn't actually have a whole lot to do fundamentally with all those little ditty bitty details. It has a lot more to do with just recognizing what can we do in the game, what do people want to do, what do they enjoy to do, and how do we organize that around an objective. um
exactly right.
getting off that soapbox. But or actually no, finishing that soapbox. So I've seen my org struggle to maintain those standards where it's like we're having and then, like, to the credit of my dear members, we would have ceremonial monthly meetings where we basically just kind of filled out the agenda and nothing, just theory crafted and maybe advanced someone from a prospect to a patch, which is important, but like, we were having meetings for no reason, and it's like that's eating into someone's Sunday. And like, at a certain point, I really took my foot off the gas trying to make people do it, because I'm just like, I'm just making the recreators a burden on these people, and like, that's not going to make the recreators last, and so like, at a certain point, you know and I guess we're onto the different topic of org health and stuff, but like, in terms of events purely, like, that's why it's important to keep the events fun and grounded into what you can do in the game and what people want to do in the game. Because, like you said, people don't want to follow tactical manuals. I shouldn't say people don't. There are some people that do, and I fucking love those people. I dream and wish that I was one of you. But nevertheless, when you're trying to provide a service to most people or a healthy amount of people, because like we said earlier, difficult to get numbers, without a lot of promotion. So, it's really hard to find 12, 24 people who are all Arma players, you know what I mean? And
Yeah,
who wanted to
not
want to
without
do
spending
that.
a lot of time finding them.
Right. Right.
Yeah, but I think all of that still goes into the idea of running the event, in that what we're talking about is that culture piece, right? And
Yeah,
Right.
the culture of your org, the culture of your events, it's very much a Venn diagram with a whole lot of overlap, right?
it
Right.
really is. It really is. And what you're saying, Cyber, it leads me to pretty much the last thing that I want to say, in that if you are in a position where it doesn't matter if you're an org leader or not, but usually the ones organizing these are org leaders. So we'll just say whatever. If you're in a position where you're putting on events, you're leading an org, then you are putting a responsibility on yourself, right?
Right.
Because you talked at the very beginning of this podcast about mutual respect for time. If you start promoting this event where you say, here's the outline, here's what we're doing, and then you don't put in the work to deliver, then you are wasting everybody's time there. So in doing this, you need to acknowledge that just even just by putting an event in your Discord and saying, "Hey, I'd like to have a drag race, a 1 kilometer long drag race on Daymar on Sunday at 10 a.m." Something super simple like that. You are putting a responsibility on yourself, and it is your job to respect the people who are showing up by making sure that you have done your job in preparing and making sure that at
Then
its core, your players can just show up and play,
then it
right? You're
Right.
the one
happens.
hosting the
Yeah.
event and you want them to show up. Make it as easy for them to do so as possible, and people will show up.
Right. And that's a great way to bring things full circle. Is that when you're making an event, you are you are making a commitment,
Exactly.
and even if the people who are coming to your event are going to laugh and giggle and shoot their foot with their gun and whatever, like, you need to treat it like a solemn duty. And if you do, the rewards, will be much more than what you put into it.
It's like that meme where there's like the little kid like playing with trains or something, and then there's like the big dude who's taking all the arrows in the back. you know?
Right. Yes, that's the event organizer right there.
Exactly. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. You gotta put in all the hard work. You gotta burden that responsibility. And if you do it, then everybody else will have a better time for it.
Well, and one kind of like ultimate technique point that I wanted to bring out at the very end is all of this that we've been talking about has been us adapting to the state that Star Citizen is in. Like you said earlier, the gameplay loops are growing and they're great, but like after a while, it's not very exciting. Like you have to do these extracurricular things, to really get what we all want out of Star Citizen, which is that big collaborative, high stakes, super cool battle, or very interesting like asteroid mining on while we're being hunted. I remember was an event we did once, was super cool. But like all those things, they don't really happen organically because you're just off there mining on your own. But all of these events that we run, they're all preparing our culture, our mutual respect for time, our ability to prepare. It's all training us for things like pyro, when this
Mhm.
shit gets real and the chips are on the table, and weeks of your effort can evaporate if someone neglects their duty. And so like I'm not trying to say that everything is like no fun, whenever we get to pyro, like it's still going to be a video game and we have to respect that. However, thank you. We at that point we will be grateful for the groundwork we have while having fun prepared for all these things. And I know that's something that you guys understand, is because obviously you're the Pyro Freelancer Corps and the expedition into Pyro, the colonizing of Pyro. I look forward to watching that flower blossom. um, but nevertheless, you know when it comes time that Star Citizen is a much more the game that we know it can be, like we can still do events and stuff and it'll still be fun, but like playing the game every day is going to feel more like an event, because there's going to be things
Agreed.
like all those raids with the compounds and distribution centers and base building, and like people, I imagine, people that, so to speak, grew up or cut their teeth on doing events like this, they're going to be real veterans when it comes to grappling with those new dynamics as they emerge. you
Yeah, I feel
know
like even just dealing with solar flares is gonna be like a little event every time it happens because you
yeah.
gotta
Oh,
scramble for cover and shit,
that
Yeah,
so
the solar
that
flares are
reminds
so
me.
cool.
Yeah, I've heard about those, haven't seen them though. But nevertheless, that reminded me of a point I noted earlier I wanted to bring up, and that was about comms and having like organizational things like that.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think you're right. That's a whole different conversation about org health and organization. However, how it relates to preparation, I think it's fair to say that when you're the coordinator and you have different roles and responsibilities, for example, there are team leaders, there's someone who's guarding the comm array, there's combat air patrol, like so having people who are both reliable and committed to their roles and understanding their own priority is a great way to mitigate even the need for people having to shout comms, especially when they're in different channels, or
Yeah.
even having a person bounce between channels. Those are all things that we've like done in real life together. And so like for example, if the person whose voice is Combat Air Patrol starts talking, everybody shuts the fuck up.
Shut the fuck up.
Yeah, and like it's just understood. If there is a logistical problem, like if I'm the person who's landing the Hercules and I need to get it on the pad, and like I'm an important part of what's happening, but I have like a thing I have to figure out, like, oh fuck, there's debris on the pad or whatever. Like I'm not going to be talking about there being debris on the pad unless someone else offers to move it out of my way. Like I'm just going to deal with it, and so having people who understand their roles and what their own priority communications are in the first place. And that's not something that necessarily goes in the document everyone has to read. That's just you as an internal guild organizer are saying like, hey, Phaedron, thank you so much for being willing to take care of the comm array. Like just make sure that if something happens at the comm array, just say the word and we'll all know it's you and we need to listen. Or like, hey, Hito, thanks for being combat air patrol. Or like if you have a contact or something like that, say this word, and like that's something only Hito has to know, and everybody in the room who's going to be hearing it, but like the event players, that's not a concern for them or a burden on them, but it helps everything go better. And
Correct.
so I just thought that that was worth going through, is just to say that having your crew, like, for the show, like having their known responsibilities is an aspect in preparation that people sometimes overlook. It's like sometimes they just say, hey, you know so and so is going to be the bus driver, and then like don't talk about it any more than that. Or like don't lay
Yeah,
any other finer expectations of like, hey, maybe don't park here or something like that. Like deal with all that ahead of time.
Yeah.
I agree completely. That wraps up pretty much everything I would like to say on the subject. I think we've pretty thoroughly covered it. Rev, you have any final remarks on this subject?
No, that pretty much covers it. Just if you're going to be running an event, just keep in mind that it's your event, true, but remember that you're doing it for the players, right? You may be running it because you think it would be cool to run an event, and you may have your ideas about how this event should go, but ultimately, as soon as people show up, it's not your event anymore, right? It's really their event now, and your real responsibility from that point forward is to make sure that the event is something that people enjoy, that people that they're going to want to come back the next time. So
That's
that's
exactly
really all I
right.
have to say there. So let me go ahead.
Yeah, agreed.
Agreed.
Well, thank you guys for watching today. As always, it's a pleasure. Cyberpunk, thank you so much for being here. It's always a pleasure to play with you and to chat with you. For anybody watching who's not already in the org. You goober.
You wanted technical difficulties. There they are. There they
Yep,
are.
There they are. Man, I thought we were gonna go off without a hitch, man. Whew. Too much to ask for.
Yeah.
All I was saying.
There we go.
All I was saying is we've got all of our links along the bottom. We have a Discord where we're active every day. We've actually got a whole bunch of guys playing right now. We're gonna go.
All right.